In this video, you're going to learn the syntax for creating and working with objects in JavaScript. So let's go ahead and kick things off by creating a new folder to store all of the code from this section. I'm going to call this folder objects. And inside of the objects directory, we're going to create a single file for this video, objects-101.js. Now, as I mentioned in the section intro, we can use objects to store related pieces of information in a single place. This allows us to model things from the real world like books, cars, or people. For a car, we have a make, a model, a color, a year, a VIN number, as well as other pieces of information. For a book, we have a title, author, and page count. And we can also model things from the virtual world. A video game has things like the title, the publisher, the price, all sorts of information along those lines. The important thing to note is that it's all related to a single entity. We can use an object to describe a car or a person by storing all of the pieces of information that make that thing up. So let's kick things off by making our first object, and we're going to model it after a book. Now, there are a ton of different properties that we could talk about related to books. We're going to focus on three: the title, the author, and the page count. So right here, let's make a new variable. Let my book equal, and now we're going to define the object. Now, what comes before the equal sign has always been the same. For strings, booleans, functions, we use let. Variable name equals. It's what's after that's different. And for objects, what we do is we open and close a set of curly braces. Now you'll notice there's no keyword associated with these curly braces like we saw with if statements, the if keyword, or functions, the function keyword. To create an object, we just open and close a set of curly braces. Now we can hit enter to format things a little bit like this. And what we're going to do is define the various properties for this object. So when we have an object, we have properties. These are pieces of data. We have the title property, the author property. We have the page count property. A property just describes a piece of data stored on an object. So let's add our first piece of data, the title for the book. To add a new property onto an object, we start by giving it a name. Much like we name variables like my book, we also name our object properties. I'm going to call this one title since I'm storing the book's title. Now, after the name for the property, we use a colon and we add the value. Now, I'm going to add a space here for formatting purposes, and the value for the title is going to be a string. In this case, the first book I'm going to model is 1984 by George Orwell. So now we have an object with a single property title, and that property's value is the string 1984. You can add as many properties as you like to an object. To add another one, we just put a comma after the first one. And on the next line, we follow the same format. The property name, author, colon space, the property value. 1984 was written by George Orwell. Now we can add a final property onto this object, a comma after that one. And right here, we add page count. And the page count for 1984 is something like 326 pages. And this is the last property that we're going to add for the moment. There is no need for a comma after the last property, just for the other ones. Now we have this object in place, and what I want to do is just use console.log to dump my book to the terminal and see what we get. So console.log, passing in my book, which is the object. Let's save the file and run things from the terminal. Over in the terminal, that would be node. Whoops, I'm in the wrong directory. cd ... to get out of functions, / objects to get into objects, and now I can run the node command. Node objects -101.js, and when I execute it, what do I get? Well, I get what looks like the object we created. I have some curly braces, and I have all of my properties. I have title, 1984, author, George Orwell, and page count, 326. So here we're dumping the entire object to the screen, but that's not particularly useful. What's a little more useful is figuring out how to get a single value off of an object. For example, if I want to print a message about this book, let's say I'm selling it on my website, how do I pull out the individual pieces of information? How do I get one of the object properties? This is done via dot notation, and it's called dot notation because it uses the dot key on your keyboard. So my book followed by a dot, followed by the property whose value we're trying to get. In this case, let's say we're trying to get the title of the book. So I would put .title right there. And you can see that Visual Studio Code is actually providing a little auto-completion. It's showing me the various properties available: author, page count, and title. I could either type the property or I could just pick it from the list, and VSC auto-completes it for me. Now that we have mybook.title, let's go ahead and save this file and see what happens when we rerun the script. I'm going to run things from the terminal, and now I'm getting the string 1984. So instead of just getting all of the object properties dumped to the screen, I'm actually just pulling off a single one, the string, and using it in a way that's meaningful for me. Now we could take this a step further and use all three pieces of information inside of a template string. So for example, I could create a template string, and I could start off with the book's title. So I would add my $ and curly braces. In here, I would use dot notation, my book dot title. After the title, I could say by followed by the author. So in this case, $ curly braces, the author, my book dot author, to pull that property off. Now I could use the page title if I wanted to, but in this case, let's just go ahead and use those two. If we rerun the program, we're now going to see that formatted string, 1984 by George Orwell. We created it using template strings. We pulled the value off of the object using dot notation. So we know how to define an object, and we know how to read properties off of an object. But we can also change an object's properties. Let's go ahead and explore how we can do that down below. What we're going to do right here is try to change the title of the book to a different George Orwell book, like Animal Farm. To do this, we also use dot notation, but in a slightly different way. So we used mybook.title to read the value of the title property, but we can actually put an equals sign after this to set the value of the title property. So now we're setting a new value for mybook.title, and I'm going to set that equal to a new string. This string is going to be Animal Farm, another book by George Orwell. Now we could actually take this console.log line, copy it, and duplicate it down below so we can see the results before and after our change. Let's rerun the script and see what we get. Over in the terminal, I rerun things. I get 1984 by George Orwell. We then have our change to the title property, and I do get that changed property value showing up. We have Animal Farm by George Orwell printing. So those are the three essential things we're going to be doing with objects. We're going to be creating them, we're going to be reading property values, and we're going to be changing property values. When we put all of this together, we have a really nice way to create models of real-world things. In this case, a model of a book. Now I want you to create an object on your own. Down below, I'll add a little challenge area to the file. What you're going to do is model a person. Now there are plenty of different properties we could include in this list. We're going to include just three. Their name, you can just use their first name. Their age, stored as a number, and their location. You can just use the city or country or whatever you want for that. Now the goal is to create this object and then generate a string based off of the object property values. And the string is going to look a little bit like this. For me, it would be Andrew is 27 and lives in Philadelphia, period. And I'm going to go ahead and put this behind a comment so it's not actually trying to run it as JavaScript. So this is the end goal. We want to create the object with those properties, and we want to print a message to the screen that uses the name, the age, and the location inside. Then you're going to bump up the age. So you're going to increase age by 1 and print the message again. Like we did above, you're going to modify one of the object properties. In this case, you're going to increase the age by 1, and then you're going to print the new message. So it should say something like Andrew is 28 and lives in Philadelphia. Take as much time as you need to knock this one out, and then go ahead and actually test your work. Save the file and run the script. Make sure you see the message, then make sure you see the message with the age increased by 1. Pause the video, and when you're done, click play. All right, how'd that one go? Step 1 is going to be to create the object. So if we're trying to read and modify the object, it needs to exist. So right here, let, and I'm going to call this one me. You might have chosen a different name. And I'm going to set it equal to a new object. So I'm going to open and close my curly braces and hit enter right inside. In here, I'm going to define those three properties. First up, name. Colon space, the name property is going to be a string. So I will open and close a single quote and type my name right inside. Next up, comma, the other property is age. Age, colon, space, age is going to be a number. So I will store it as such. And the final property we're going to add after a comma, of course, is the location. Location, and I'll store the location as a string. And for me, I'm just going to use Philadelphia, the city that I currently live in. Now, down below, we're going to kick things off by printing a message that uses those pieces of information. So console.log to print something. Then we're going to create a template string, and then we're going to inject those pieces of information, starting off with the name. So $ curly braces, right inside, we're trying to read a property value. And remember, we use dot notation for that. We access the object. We then use a dot, and then we pick the property that we want to read. In this case, it is the name property. Now, after the name, we're going to have space is space followed by their age. So $ curly braces, me dot age. After the age, we're going to have and lives in space. And the last thing, the period, is going to come just after the location. So right before that period, $ curly braces, me dot location. Now that we have this in place, we can go ahead and test our work. We can choose to run the program now, which I will, and just make sure things are looking correct. Andrew is 27 and lives in Philadelphia. Now what I wanted you to do was modify the age and then print this again, which means that we're just going to duplicate this line for the moment, although we'll learn how to break this out into a function in the next video. And right here between the two, we're going to try to modify the age. So we want to change me dot age, and we want to set it equal to some sort of age. Now we don't want to put a static value here like 99, for example. We want to read the old value and add 1 to it. So we're going to set me dot age equal to me dot age plus 1. So right here, we're taking the old value of age, we're adding 1, and we're storing it as the new value for age. In this case, I'm bumping myself up from 27 to 28. Now we can go ahead and remove the comments and test the final code. I'm going to save the file, rerun things from the terminal. Right here, I have Andrew is 27 and lives in Philadelphia. On the next line, Andrew is 28 and lives in Philadelphia. And there we have it. This was the goal for the challenge. If you're seeing these two messages, then you're all done. To recap, we now know how to do three things. We know how to define an object. We know how to read object properties, and we know how to change object properties. In the next one, we're going to continue looking at how we can use objects in this language by exploring how they relate to functions. I'm excited to get to that, so I will see you over there.